Today we're going to talk about repurposing the coal power plants to nuclear, and SMRs are key to repurposing infrastructure at or near power plants that used to be coal plants. It provides a clean energy source that can be sited where needed, not where energy resources are available. Repurposing coal plants with nuclear energy provides several non-electricity related benefits, including supporting the economy of small towns, reducing environmental and health impacts, providing higher wage jobs, and potential for related industries like hydrogen production. During this panel, we will try to tackle several questions, including opportunities for coal to nuclear transition, and based on factors such as local electricity market needs, the value of existing infrastructure, state laws, and so on. And we also try to determine how to address key barriers that exist when we talk about projects like this, and how can we address the issue with timing, like how we decommission the coal while the nuclear is getting commissioned. So all these questions we will try to cover, but we will start with introduction of our panels. We have a ladies panel, and this is very rare event in the nuclear industry. So I hope we set the stage for normalizing it. We need more women in nuclear. And I'll start with Kirsty. Kirsty, sought after advisor to governments, industry, academic networks, and non-profit organizations on nuclear competitiveness, hydrogen innovation, and deep decarbonization. She is co-founder of TerraPraxis, a non-profit organization that develops scalable strategies for advanced nuclear energy. She serves as a managing partner of Lucid Catalyst, a consultancy firm focused on large-scale, affordable, market-based decarbonization. With a long-standing role in the UK government's Nuclear Innovation Research and Advisory Board, she co-founded Energy for Humanity. And this is where I met you first time during Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp, when you mentored students thinking about, how can we innovate nuclear? So this is... Now you're doing it. Now I'm doing it. She serves on National Academies... She serves on the board of the U.S. Nuclear Innovation Alliance, which is the founding body for Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp and Voices for Nuclear. The U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine appointed her to serve on the committee that led to publication of the landmark report called Laying the Foundation for New and Advanced Nuclear Reactors in the United States. That's a fresh report. Read it. International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Grossi also appointed her to be the UK representative on IAEA Standing Advisory Group on Nuclear Applications. Here we have Kirsten. Kirsten Cutler. So yeah, you will understand why I'm so careful about the names soon. Kirsten is a senior strategist for nuclear energy innovation at the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation. With more than 20 years of experience, she leads the department's efforts supporting climate and energy security goals through nuclear energy innovation. Kirsten spearheaded the foundational infrastructure for the responsible use of SMR technology program, leads U.S. government's effort on the first-of-a-kind SMR project in Romania, and developed advanced nuclear announcements for the UN climate change conferences, J7 leader summits, International Atomic Agency ministerials, and other forums. In 2015, she served as an assistant director for nuclear energy and non-proliferation in the Executive Office of the President, Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she launched the White House Summit on Nuclear Energy and White House Nuclear Energy Technology Innovation Workshop. After the terrorist attacks of 2001, she led the U.S. delegations to the IAEA to address the dirty bomb threat, and headed efforts through the J8 and IAEA to negotiate and develop first international export control framework for radioactive sources that was eventually incorporated in IAEA international standards and further into US laws. She earned her PhD from the University of Minnesota for research in radioisotope geochemistry, geochronology, and paleoclimate reconstruction. And last but not the least, Christine. Kristen is a Senior Manager, Indigenous Relations of Ontario Power Generation. She comes from Sagamok Anishinaabeg First Nation on the north shore of Georgian Bay of Ontario. In her role at Ontario Power Generation and as a director of the board of the Canadian Nuclear Association, Christine is able to live out her passion for supporting the development of relationships with the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities and brings an established network and experience in building effective partnerships through collaboration. Christine's goal has been to increase the participation of Indigenous peoples in employment, procurement, and engagement activities and to support industry's awareness among Indigenous nations and communities. She has Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science and a Master's degree in Business. She worked in various fields in the nuclear industry, including HR, finance, equity and diversity, corporate social responsibility, communications, public education, and community and Indigenous relations, which all led her approach and strategic vision. She also serves on 2 community boards and coaches youth ice and ball hockey teams in and around Saugeen First Nation, where she lives with her family. Through these roles, Christine aims to support young development and community relationships and to make the difference today for future generations and so they would have a better world than we have today. Thank you so much. And just to know, I met Kirsten at COP26, and I was still a PhD student, and she has a daughter who also, I guess, gonna study nuclear at some point. But yeah, we expanding the women in nuclear as much as we can. So with that, I guess I'm gonna start with proposed questions. And I'll start with Christine, because there is a lot of stuff going on in Canada, especially in Ontario. The province of Ontario moved off of coal-fired electricity generation 10 years ago. And how can you share some of the key to success in that transition, and what we can learn from it?
Thank you, Dinara. Thank you for the introduction as well. Ontario in Canada moved off of coal, and it started in 2001. We go back to then when coal comprised 25% of Ontario's electricity, and there were impacts to our environment as a result of that coal production, and things like environmental smog days, issues in people's health. And as a result of a partnership, a collaboration between Ontario Power Generation, the Ministry of Energy in Ontario, and the Independent Electricity System Operator, a lot of work went into building a strategy to phase out coal in Ontario. So of the 25% of electricity that was produced in Ontario by coal, it was 5 coal plants. And so in order to phase those plants out, there was obviously a need to replace that electricity that was going to be shut down. And it resulted in the restart of 2 nuclear reactors in Ontario that were operated by Bruce Power, and OPG's efforts to also ensure adequate electricity production through its varied fleet, its technologies of nuclear, renewable generation, hydroelectricity, and some gas. So some of the keys to success in attaining that incredible accomplishment over about 12 years, from 2001 to the final, I think it was around 2014, when we had phased coal out entirely. It involved definitely the collaborative approach that I just described, but also through that collaboration, the development of plans, being patient, being open and flexible to the ups and downs to get through that. It couldn't have been done if we didn't have that flexibility in direction. It also included, involvement of the labor unions. I mean, we're talking people who had jobs that were affected by this, so really close interaction with the labor unions and the workers, and I think ultimately, just communicating and working with stakeholders and partners across the province to ensure that people were aware of what was being done, why it's being done, and what the ultimate outcome would be. And that is, by 2014, 0 smog days in Ontario as a result of that accomplishment.
That's fantastic result, and we hope to see these results more. Maybe some other countries will follow the lead and restart their power plants that they shut down. We know some examples. The next question I would address to Kirsty about the concept of coal to nuclear transition and how it can be beneficial for community needs and for transition overall.
Thank you. Let's first of all think about why we care about coal. And, many of you may know already that it's the single largest source of global carbon emissions in the energy sector. And despite all the progress that we are making in many places and, successfully building out renewables and everything, coal is booming. It's actually breaking records year on year, and 2023 is expected to be no exception. We have to take into account the fact, that coal use is growing despite, global awareness of our decarbonization challenges, and really understand why that is. And, the reason is that we need the energy. And, particularly in developing economies that are densely populated without, huge amounts of land available necessarily for building massive amounts of renewables, but that are also, need to expand their electricity infrastructure and their energy infrastructure to meet rising global demand. Coal is really, a way of getting these, economies out of poverty. So it's really tough to think that we're just going to shut down those coal plants. And then even in countries with old coal, like in the United States and in Europe, despite some successes, and, really congratulations to Ontario for that incredible achievement. I think Ontario joins, one of a relatively small number of economies, modern industrialized economies on the planet that have really clean electricity systems, thanks to a combination of nuclear and renewables. In each case, unless apart from in some places where they benefit from a lot of hydro or a lot of geothermal. It's very difficult to shut down coal, even in those economies with old coal like in the United States and in Europe, because not only do those utilities require dispatchable, firm, reliable energy to complement intermittent renewables, but they also, the communities and the societies around those coal plants need the socioeconomic benefits and jobs. So what we're finding is that coal plant owners, utilities, communities are really interested in the opportunity to replace the reliable, dispatchable energy currently supplied in many cases by coal, by co-locating nuclear plants at those existing coal plant sites. And that means that you can have a continuation of jobs and socioeconomic benefits at those plants. It means that the utilities can continue to supply that reliable energy that societies need to function. And it means that you eliminate the emissions. So those are really the immediate sort of fantastic benefits from replacing coal with nuclear, which is why we're seeing a real appetite for it.
Speaking of the government support, Ontario has been very supportive or able to pivot when it was crucial. So how can we, what role does U.S. government play in such initiatives as coal to nuclear transition? Tell me about this.
Thank you so much, Dinara. So the Biden administration has really put climate action at the center of our foreign policy, and that includes nuclear energy as part of the solution to getting towards net zero. And as part of that, the U.S. Department of State has really ramped up our efforts in support of action internationally on supporting the deployment of both traditional large reactors as well as small and advanced nuclear power plants. We've done things like increased the number of international instruments that we put out, including NCMOUs, which are Nuclear Cooperation and Memoranda of Understanding, IGAs, which are legally binding government-to-government agreements, as well as many of you may have seen, we just had a signing of a U.S.-Philippines 123 agreement, which is the foundational agreement needed for cooperation on nuclear energy. In addition to those activities, we are really ramping up our foreign assistance and our capacity building efforts. As part of my bio, I talked about the first program, that's the foundational infrastructure for the responsible use of SMR technology. I can talk a little bit more about that later, but we've put in about $40 million so far. We're partnered with over 20 countries. We have a team right now in Chile doing a regional project, and that helps countries build up their nuclear power programs from the bottom up under the highest safety, security, and non-proliferation standards. But in terms of coal to SMR conversions, we've also launched Project Phoenix. This was announced by Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, at the last COP, COP27. That is a program that we are doing to support exactly what we're talking about here, coal to SMR conversions. That includes retaining and retraining local talent and jobs. That program is carried out under the first program, and it included a solicitation for proposals from countries throughout Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And then those projects were selected competitively. And we were pleased to again have Spec John Kerry announce the awardees for Project Phoenix at the Three Seas Initiative Summit in Bucharest in September, and those are Czech Republic, Poland, and the Slovak Republic. Those three countries, their proposals we approved those proposals, and we will be partnering together with them on the feasibility studies as well as the provision of advisory services. Last on that front, we just had our official launch event. That was in Slovakia, in Bratislava, just on November 9th. It was a great event with 17 countries participating, and that officially launched Project Phoenix and those feasibility studies in those three countries. So we're really pleased to have that event and to move forward on those projects. Thank you.
A lot of things going on, so if you guys were surprised, I was very surprised. So Christine, speaking of communities, in your experience, coal communities have been diligently providing a lot of electricity for our the rest of the country's success, and now we're transitioning from them and trying to shut down all the coal plants. So what is the value and what is the benefits that SMR can bring to those communities? Especially remote communities.
Yes. Okay, so when we talk about remote communities in Ontario, we're talking about communities that are in pretty much the northern part of Canada. If you're familiar with the geography, Canada is quite a large landmass, and most of the population lives along the border, the southern part of Canada. And so in Ontario specifically, there are about 250 remote communities comprising of about up to 200,000 people. And so when we talk about remote communities in terms of energy, these are communities that are not on the grid in the integrated network of electricity supply, and so they rely on alternative options, primarily diesel. And so when we're talking about diesel and consumption of diesel and burning of that fuel for electricity and heating, it's a massive amount of diesel that 200,000 people require in a year to survive in these remote communities. So the value of an SMR or a micromodular reactor to communities like I just described is immense. There's an immense value to bringing an SMR into a community and helping them convert from diesel into nuclear. So I know we're talking about coal to nuclear, and I just talked about diesel to nuclear, but for the Ontario perspective that I bring, that's the way it looks. That's our landscape that we have in Ontario. And we are in the middle of developing small modular reactors in Ontario. The government has supported that endeavor, and OPG, who I work for, is building the first small modular reactor in Canada. And that as well as there's a micromodular reactor in development in Ontario through Global First Power, a subsidiary of OPG. And that project is a demonstration project that will serve to test and prove that micromodular reactors are sustainable sources of energy that can be used in remote communities. So we've got a lot of progress going on, and it's exciting to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Kirsten, question for you. What kind of policy changes do we need to implement to help this transition to happen and speed up this project deployment, like coal to nuclear?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we were talking about this out in the hallway. I guess I would say the number one policy change that I would advocate for, and I know there are others in the audience who would agree with me, is on the financing piece. Right now, the World Bank and other multilateral development banks have a policy against supporting the build of new nuclear projects. In the United States, we have our Development Finance Corporation has revoked its prohibition against nuclear energy builds, and we're hoping that that sort of will set the stage for other banks and multilateral financing institutions to also take action and see the clear need for supporting nuclear energy with financial resources. We all know that nuclear power, it has a high capital upfront cost, and this is very challenging for especially emerging countries to take on. So the financing piece is critical, and to the extent that we can change those particular policies, I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. And Kirsty, for you, so we talk about coal plants and them transition to nuclear, but are there other industries that are that can benefit from SMRs and can transition and decarbonize the economy fast?
Yeah, well, so one of the sort of the key opportunities that we found with the opportunity to repurpose existing coal plants was a really new kind of business model for the deployment of nuclear technology that essentially separates what we call the heat island from the power island. Now that means that you can gain significant benefits in the schedule for delivering the nuclear project by no longer needing to build a whole new power island if you can supply emissions-free steam from the nuclear heat island into the existing power island at an existing coal plant. That reduces the schedule, it reduces the cost, and other design innovations such as seismic isolation, for example, enable real standardization, meaning that you can design and license your nuclear island once and then even have it, delivered as a manufactured product, very standardized, very cost effective, and really has a significant impact on the pre-development activities too, the feasibility studies, the licensing, the siting, and so on. So when we started to really sort of explore these many benefits that could accelerate the coal plant conversion, what we found was that actually there's a huge appetite for emissions-free heat and power in a lot of other sectors as well, such as in oil and gas, for example, in chemicals and steel. These hard-to-abate sectors, these industrial energy users, require massive amounts of heat and power and steam and hydrogen that they currently produce essentially by burning fossil fuels generally at their location, at their existing sites. So it's not going to be straightforward for them to either depend on massive grid expansion to replace those, substitute those energy services, or indeed to build wind and solar projects which would require tens of thousands of acres of land to be co-located with their existing facilities. So just like with the coal plant owners, these industrial energy users are really interested in the opportunity to match the existing site footprint of their existing facility by locating a what we call a heat box, a microreactor or a advanced nuclear technology unit at that site to supply those energy services without emissions. And I'll just add that one other major benefit that the industrial users and utilities are recognizing is that if you can convert these coal plants and these industrial energy facilities, thereby continuing to use the existing transmission, that could have an enormous benefit, not just because you're repurposing infrastructure we already have, which means that we are de-risking our chances of failing in the clean energy transition, but it also means that you could potentially massively increase the amount of energy running through those lines. Right now, the 200 coal plants operating in the United States are operating at about 50% capacity factor. Imagine if you could replace that reliable power with emissions-free heat and power from nuclear energy, and then maybe even double the capacity factor running through those transmission lines. That means that we're doubling the amount of energy that's available without needing to build any new transmission. So these are the kinds of strategies that we really need to accelerate the transition. Thanks.
Thank you. And the last question I have for Christine. So, what about the waste question? So we cannot finish without it. So when it comes to nuclear, that's the very frequent question, and usually it comes with environmental justice part of it. So can you tell more about your experience and Ontario Power Generation experience?
Sure. So when we talk about nuclear, there is a waste aspect that we have to keep in the conversation. And so Ontario Power Generation is responsible for managing the nuclear waste that's produced in the 16 reactors in Ontario. And over the 50 plus years that nuclear has been in operation in Ontario, the waste has been managed and stored and monitored without fail and without harm to the public and the environment. So when I just quickly will talk about managing waste, and when I say managing, it's not just simply stored in a warehouse and locked up and forgotten about and monitored. It's actually OPG undertakes to incorporate new innovations and technological developments in the handling of it, whether it's segmenting, sorting, what's there over the last 50 years, the legacy waste, in order to I'm thinking the words compact, incinerate, free release into some of the waste is actually just free release material for landfill sites. So there are a lot of opportunities in the management approach, and those are being explored constantly and being incorporated into the practices. And last on waste, we could talk about this for quite a while, but last on waste is, not all waste is in fact waste. There are some very helpful byproducts that come from what we call waste. We kind of clump it into one thing, but really, I'll just mention medical isotopes. You know, that's a byproduct of nuclear power production, and without medical isotopes, we would be lost as an entire global society. There are so many helpful aspects to that, and that's another opportunity, another panel conversation. But yeah, it's an important topic, and it's not given enough time here, and that's okay. And it's something that is a part of the entire conversation, and important to communities, important to industry, and is done in a way that there are international best practices, not just in Canada, but around the world. And my colleagues here who spent time with IAEA, I'm sure, know lots about it as well.
Fantastic. No, it's great that it's taken care of and well thought. I mean, that's a general practice about nuclear waste. We just wanted to make sure that the public understands the implication and what we do as an industry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies panel. Christine, Kirsten, and Kirsty. And I'm Dinara. So, thank you.